Hello all and welcome to my channel, it's Ludic speaking. In this video, I will be providing a short, in-depth look at some talents I feel will help any Preservation Evoker player hit the ground running in a Mythic Plus setting. All the conclusions I will come to in this video have all been drawn from personal testing that I've done on the Dragonflight beta when Mythic Plus testing was available between October 7th and 10th. So please keep that in mind if any class tuning happens. Quick disclaimer, all the contents in this video are pure speculation based simply on my hands-on experience and player testing. Basically Feelycraft. In no way is any of this content backed by hard theory crafting numbers, but I will try to provide a little bit of insight into why I have the opinions I do. So let's get started. Alrighty, so let's just jump right in. I'm honestly just going to assume that you do have a basic knowledge of how the class works. So I'm really just gonna kind of go through the talents that I feel are a must-have in a Mythic Plus setting, based off of the numbers that I've seen on my details, through multiple keys, you're running multiple different builds. This is the talent build that I feel covers all your bases in 99% of situations you will encounter in Mythic Plus. Let's dive right into which talents I feel are the absolute must-have / most important. So, starting off with the like green side of the tree, which is like your nature magic. Obviously, you're gonna take Spirit Bloom because you pretty much are getting that to unlock this whole section. But anyway, Spirit Bloom is one of your most potent abilities in the Mythic Plus setting. The fact that you can heal almost your entire party with it, even without having Font of Magic, makes it an incredibly efficient emergency burst heal. You can heal pretty much everyone in your group that's taking any moderate amount of damage. It'll almost like instantly top them from like 30% health. So you definitely are going to want to have spiritual clarity. I'm going to go a little bit more in depth with this talent as to why it's so important, especially in the first season of Dragonflight. Empath is a great talent in general. I actually played with it a lot and I really liked it, but spiritual clarity will be a must-have in the first tier because of the synergy it has with Preservation Evoker's 2-piece bonus. So, for all those who might not be aware, your 2-piece bonus makes your empower spells buff the crit chance of your reversion for 6 seconds. So, you basically want to be using as many empower abilities as you can without overlapping them to maintain that 2-piece bonus buff. Reversion will more often than not be one of your top heals in a Mythic Plus setting. Honestly, probably in any setting, even in Raid and PvP. So you want to buff that ability as much as possible. Sorry, I keep disconnecting. Give it a sec. Just gonna cut it here. So just a quick demonstration. It turns Spirit Bloom into a 20-second cooldown. When you use Spirit Bloom, you get this buff Time Bender. You get to use Spirit Bloom more often. Obviously, that's a great throughput increase for your reversion, just being able to get that buff more often. I'm sure Empath will become more popular later on in expansion, but for the time being, I feel like this 2-piece makes spiritual clarity a kind of must-have. Okay, so let's go, just going down the tree a little bit. Fluttering Seedlings, Field of Dreams, and Exhilarating Bursts are all just kind of basic passive throughput increases to one of your main heals in a Mythic Plus key, which is Emerald Blossom. Your top 3 heals in general will be between Reversion, Dream Breath, and Emerald Blossom, I've noticed. Possibly Temporal Anomaly will be up there if you're doing a key where it's very easy for your group to stack, but I'll get a little bit more into that later. So, seeing as how Emerald Communion is going to be a very controversial talent, I would not say it's a must-have talent. It's the one nice aspect of Emerald Communion going on the left side of this tree is that you only need to spend 2 talent points. But I found that Field of Dreams procs can really save you when you're in a bind if you get like really crazy RNG with your Emerald Blossoms. So yeah, moving on. Um, Either way, I would not call these a must-have, but it's more so just a way to get down to these lower talents that I do feel are must-have talents. Um, Exhilarating Burst is a must-have talent. You get Essence Burst quite a bit, especially with your 4-piece bonus. Your four-piece bonus basically makes your reversion give you instant living flame cast, and those instant living flame casts have a chance to basically give you essence bursts. That's like that's basically the only way your essence bursts procs to begin with is from casting completed living flame casts. So yeah, with the first tier's 4-piece, you're going to be able to proc essence burst a lot, and you'll basically have high uptime on this huge passive increase to your critical healing. I do feel that crit in general will be like a great stat for Preservation Evoker. Again, no 3 crafted numbers to back that up, but there's just so much synergy in the spec between crit and his talents, so we'll see. Obviously, Call of Ysera is going to be a must-have talent. As I said, one of your top heals in Mythic Plus will be Dream Breath. Verdant Embrace will also be something that you will most likely be using on cooldown when someone in your group takes any amount of like moderate damage. So being able to just like Verdant Embrace and then instantly have this giant Dream Breath on your entire party will be great for like catching your group back up. Dream Breath is just one of those abilities that does an insane amount of healing for one button. I'll try and show some footage on my stream later. But yeah, Call of Ysera is just a great talent. I don't really recommend using this proc and Living Flame that much unless someone really just needs like crazy single target healing. Power Nexus is the next must-have talent I would recommend for Mythic Plus. Having 6 essences as opposed to 5 just smooths out the rotation of a Preservation Evoker like quite a bit. It basically allows you to spam Emerald Blossoms back to back, which I think will be the main bender of your essences, at least when it comes to healing in Mythic Plus. But even then, if you want to spam Echo, this lets you spam 3 Echoes back to back or 2 Blossoms back to back. When you have 5, you kind of have to like send 1 Blossom and an Echo, or just like wait for your essences to catch up. It just makes it very clunky and awkward when you don't have 6 essences. So I feel like Power Nexus will be a mandatory talent in honestly most endgame content. Renewing Breath, must-have talent. The reason why it's a must-have, as I said, Dream Breath will be one of your top heals in a Mythic Plus setting. This just gives Dream Breath an amazing hot component to it that actually heals for just crazy amounts. Yeah, will let you like rest easy after you cast Dream Breath if you can hit your entire group with it. And then finally at the bottom of our nature side, we have Dragonflight. The capstone talents for Preservation Evoker, I feel, are going to be very controversial based on who you ask. I will say Cycle of Life from testing is probably your weakest capstone talent right now, and I'd say it's almost like a never pick the way it's tuned right now, especially in Mythic Plus. Maybe in rating it might be decent, but the throughput on Cycle of Life is just incredibly low. You almost never need the healing from it when you have it. Dragonflight is a must-have, I think, because it provides you with a short 2-minute cooldown that has quite a big range which is great for like some of the boss fights in these new Mythic Plus dungeons, like Azure Vaults and Ruby Life Pools. The last boss in Azure Vaults is quite spread out. Being able to Dreamflight across the room and hit multiple party members who are spreading out to kill the crystals can come in handy. So yeah, it's basically just a really nice burst cooldown that's short. As some of you may know, Rewind is a very long cooldown. It's a 3-minute cooldown, even with the cooldown reduction. So just having Dreamflight as another snappy burst healing cooldown option to get your group out of like an oh shit situation is really nice. It comes in handy quite a bit. You don't have to ever use like the full range of it. You can always just aim it in melee, and like especially on trash, you'll hit like mostly everyone in your group. Only on bosses we have to really like take the time to, you know, aim it really carefully, etc. Alrighty, so let's just get to the middle of the tree. As I'm sure you may have noticed watching people's streams, Preservation Evoker can output quite a bit of damage in a Mythic Plus setting. Um, One of the abilities that allows it to do so is Fire Breath. It's something that you're basically always want to be using on cooldown because again, it even though it's a DPS ability, it does have synergy with your two-piece Time Bender. It will, whenever you use Fire Breath, it will empower your Reversion's critical strike chance. So yeah, you're gonna be wanting to use this whole time anyway. Life Giver's Flame is a fantastic talent that basically gives you another option to burst heal your group. Preservation Evoker is very cooldown oriented. It's probably the only healer that only has like one ability you can spam. The only other healer that comes like close to not having abilities you can spam all the time is this Discipline Priest. I feel. So yeah, like Living Flame is your only option. You don't have like even Echo, you can't spam it because it's, you know, your Echo uses are based on your Essence regeneration. So you really only have Living Flame. Fire Breath just turns one of your DPS abilities into a huge AoE party heal. That also has a hot component to it. Because Fire Breath does put a dot on targets. So after the initial burst heal. And it will heal pretty much everyone in your group unless they're like incredibly far away, but guaranteed like the initial hit. And then the burning dot on the boss will heal everyone for a hot portion, which is really nice. I'll demonstrate it right now. You can see. No one's in my group right now, but Fire Breath, dot, dot. Not really showing any, it's showing some healing ticks on me. This person over here. Yeah, I'm not really grouped with anyone I probably should be for it, but anyway, I digress. Moving on. So let's talk about the right side of the tree. The bronze abilities, or the bronze talents that I feel are going to be the biggest must-have for Mythic Plus, but probably all content. 100% you are going to want Golden Hour and Punctuality. Punctuality just gives Reversion 2 charges, pretty self-explanatory. As I said, Reversion is a fantastic hot. You will always be using this hot on cooldown. It just having 2 charges just makes it easier for you to cover more party members in your group while you're DPSing. Golden Hour is pretty much a giant buff to Reversion. It basically allows people who just took damage to get like instantly healed quickly. It's kind of like, even though Reversion has like a cooldown, this is kind of like a part of Preservation Evoker's like triage. 15% of damage taken in the last 5 seconds is quite a bit, especially if they've taken like that 15% damage scales infinitely. So if like, as long as like they're still alive, right? So if like someone took like 150k hit, you know, 15% of that will just get healed instantly. Like, you know. Anyway, sorry, I'm like losing my train of thought. Moving on. This is where the controversial talents are going to start to come into play a bit. So I personally have Temporal Anomaly as a must-have for Mythic Plus, but it's probably not for the reason that most people are suspecting. I personally think it's a must-have simply because it only costs 2 points to get down to Punctuality if you take Temporal Anomaly. Your other option is Time Lord, but from my personal experience testing Mythic Plus from 10s to 15s with like a variety of different affixes, your Echo healing does not really make up the substantial amount of your healing. Even the echoes from like temporal anomalies that you get using Resonating Sphere, it just doesn't matter that much in the Mythic Plus setting compared to Raid. Like Time Lord is very much a mandatory talent, I'd say, in a Raid setting because you're always going to be sending Temporal Anomaly basically on cooldown and slashing people with Resonating Sphere, which applies Echo, and just buffing that Echo even further because it is a smaller Echo is really nice in Raids. In Mythic Plus, from my personal experience, I have found that Temporal Anomaly is very hit or miss, especially on bosses. During Trash, you can use this ability pretty much very frequently. It'll definitely hit most members in your group during trash pulls because everyone's more or less like stacked for the most part. Um, but in once you get to like the bosses, there are a lot of spread out bosses, especially in the new dungeons, and Temporal Anomaly can really just like whiff and only hit like melee basically. So if you're playing with any casters, Temporal Anomaly can be very weak in the Mythic Plus setting. Um, It also has an incredibly high mana cost, so you have so many other ways to heal a group of 5 in keys. So you won't necessarily need to cast it on cooldown in the Mythic Plus setting. It's really just you really just spec into this to allow you to get down to these other bronze magic talents, or they're all arcane magic, but I just call it the bronze side, of course, right? Um, I opt into Resonating Sphere over in Nosdormo's teachings. Um, the the temporal anomaly orbs they pulse frequently enough where it's very easy to hit everyone in a 5-man, um, like with the smart heal shields that it does. So I'd rather just apply Echo to anyone it hits. So as soon as I cast Reversion, they'll automatically just get like 2 charges of Reversion if they had Echo on them. I'll try and demonstrate this really quickly. I'm gonna sphere over here. I'm running in my sphere. It automatically put Echo on me. Gonna reversion myself, and now I have 2 hots of reversion on myself. And you can see how like that's a very quick way to blanket your entire group with multiple reversions in the blink of an eye in Mythic Plus. So moving on, we have Energy Loop is a talent I decided I always want to take. Preservation had Energy Loop, I would say this is like a must-have talent. The spec has basically no mana regeneration on its own, so you basically want to take Energy Loop because you're mostly going to be spending your essences on Disintegrate for single target DPS or Emerald Blossoms. I did not find I needed to use my essences on Echo like hardly ever, so if you don't need to do any Emerald Blossom healing, you will always be regenerating mana with Disintegrate when you are spending your essences to do some damage. It basically makes you not have to worry about mana like hardly ever. I don't feel that the mana you gain from Emerald Communion is anywhere near as competitive because it's a long cooldown for only 10% mana. 1700 mana from Disintegrate is just insane. Like, if you look at like the sheer numbers of it, it adds up really quickly. So I will say, Energy Loop is definitely a must-play talent. Even more so when you're playing Temporal Anomaly, if you find someone that is like struggling with mana because you're using Anomaly on cooldown, Energy Loop will smooth out those wrinkles in a flash. Timeless Magic, I will say, is a mandatory talent because it makes your reversion 3 seconds longer. As I said, reversion is one of your top heals in a Mythic Plus setting. So this is honestly just a great talent for that alone. Making time dilation and echo last longer is nice, not really needed. If you uh with a longer reversion, you also have the opportunity for more 4-piece procs. Again, your 4-piece makes your reversion ticks have a chance to make your living flame an instant cast, and those instant casts can turn into essence bursts. So having just 3 more seconds of one of your best abilities is kind of a no-brainer. I Going into the rewind talents, I found Temporal Artificer to be a bit nicer than Erasure. They're both quite good. It'll definitely come down to your preference and playstyle. Honestly, the 50% reduction wasn't that bad in keys. It was honestly like the weaker rewinds were pretty sufficient in topping my group still. Um, but the downside is like if you really do need like that full rewind to like blast your group and it's weaker, there could be some pitfalls there. So I think just having a nice like solid 3-minute cooldown, especially when you have so many other cooldowns you can rely on, having it just be 3 minutes all the time is a nice middle of the road option. So before I get into the class talent tree for Evoker, I am basically just going to quickly discuss some options. If you do not like this build, some of the more effective options I found, you can take some, or you can, if you want to like move some points around. Again, I mentioned you don't really have to take Anomaly. I found it to be very mediocre in keys a lot of the time. You can take these 2 points and put them in the Time Lord if you want. I personally just prefer the Anomaly for like those AoE oh shit situations. Um, Another option you can do is if you really don't like to lean on the RNG of Field of Dreams, and Fluttering Ceilings, you can just put 2 points in Emerald Communion, which is honestly like not a terrible cooldown. Especially in keys, like you can usually heal people in your group for 20% of their HP per tick if you're like topped off. And then you can take like these spare points and I think Grace, like, you can put them in like in Grace Period, which I think is a great talent. It increases when it's maxed out, it increases your all healing the targets with reversion by 10%. This also includes reversion healing itself, so your reversion ticks will be bigger. So a very friendly talent if you are still learning Evoker and are not maybe familiar with everything in its kit. This is just a flat increase that, like, as long as you're using reversion on cooldown, you will always benefit from. If you feel that you don't really care for the rewind reduction, you can put that point in Spark of Insight. I find that for beginner players, this might be a little harder to use, as some people might not be aware of what they might not be tracking their temporal compression stacks. I don't really feel that proccing essence bursts constantly was like completely necessary in keys. Having like rewind available for the OSHA situations, pretty nice, but again, I think this would be a very controversial opinion. Say what you will. I'm sure both sides have credence, honestly. Um, Ouroboros, don't even want to get into that. I don't think you're going to be using Echo that much. Font of Magic, you can take some point, like if you don't feel like you need the mana, or you don't feel like you want like the Fire Breath as a healing cooldown, you can just go into Lifebind and Font of Magic just to have like an extra Empower rank. I personally did not like that in keys. There's a lot of movement in keys, especially with the Thundering affix, and Preservation especially. I'm not so sure about Devastation, but a lot of time for Preservation, you do not need to fully empower your spells and keys. Dream Breath just collapse even at like a rank 1. Um, but I have in keys, I can almost guarantee that like a rank 4 Dream Breath will almost always be like overhealing. So that's why I don't really try to go for Font of Magic. I'd say the main benefit of going for Font of Magic though is you definitely will do more damage with bigger flame breaths. Like that's probably like the best argument I think you can make for it. Again, Cycle of Life, I think it's a trash talent. I would not personally take that. Time Dilation, just in time might be interesting, especially if you need a personal defensive more. But yeah, you can basically like, I'd say this rewind talent is very optional in my opinion. Temporal Anomaly, very optional. Like I said, I basically just use it to get down here. But if you really just want a hard commit to like doing more damage to Living Flame, more power to you, you can just go down the middle and then go to the right. But again, you'd have to take Time Lord to get the punctuality. I don't recommend that. And yeah, so that wraps it up for the spec side of the tree. Let's move on to the class side. So for the class side of Evoker, keys, generally for healers, you want to be doing a healthy mix of damage and healing. Luckily for Evokers, you can pretty much take any important talent you want to do both pretty well. This is the layout I've basically made. The must-have talents you're going to want are basically everything on the green side to buff your healing. Verdant Embrace is an amazing heal. It's a little dangerous when you fly to people, but it's basically like Evoker's version of Holy Word Serenity if you've ever played a Holy Priest. Um, Obviously, you want to take a tune into Dream just for the 4% healing buff to yourself and to others. Bountiful Bloom is really nice for like when your Mythic Plus group is stacked. You can pretty much hit everyone in your group with Emerald Blossom because it'll make it heal, instead of 3 people, it'll heal 5 people. Panacea, again, great if the person you're blossoming isn't on you. You're at least healing yourself in case like there's any rot damage happening. Renewing Blaze, if anyone has done high keys, the more defenses you have, the better. I like to run Renewing Blaze on a minute cooldown with the Fire Within talent. I would not say it's mandatory, but highly recommended. Like I said, just anyone who's done competitive Mythic Plus keys, the more defensives you can bring to the table, generally the better for you and everyone's mental. Again, same thing with Zephyr. I don't think it's like the most amazing cooldown in the world, but just having that other option for DR versus AoE attacks is just great. There's a lot of, from what I've noticed in the Ruby Life pools and Azure Volts, a lot of the bosses do AoE damage with their abilities, and it's a lot of unavoidable AoE damage. So Zephyr is just one more tool in your kit to combat those mechanics. I basically go into Rescue just to get to Aerial Mastery. Anyone who's played Evoker knows that Hover is like your bread and butter for maneuvering around the battlefield. Having an additional charge of Hover is mandatory. You're probably going to want it in every area of content, no matter what you're doing, whether it be Arena, Battlegrounds, PvP, or general PvP, Mythic Plus, rating, etc. Now, this is where it gets very interesting for Evokers in Mythic Plus. In a raid scenario, I probably would never go down this far because I like to kind of go down this middle for Source of Magic, etc. to like buff my fellow healers and get access to Time Spiral. But in Mythic Plus, I do not think you need Time Spiral whatsoever. So also Source of Magic is pretty useless. You're the healer in your group, you can't buff yourself with it. Tempered Scales, while it's a nice cooldown, while it's a nice magic damage reduction, 4% in the grand scheme of things, not that great when you have access to all this juicy damage in this left column. So let's just like talk about these talents a little bit. Quell's like where you start off your damage side. It gives Evoker access to an interrupt. That's probably one of the main reasons to bring a Preservation Evoker or any healer in Dragonflight, because all of them are getting access to a kick, except for Priest, lol. That's why I'm pretty much not playing my Priest anymore. The nice thing too is that this is the gatekeeper to your increased magic damage talent. All your damage is magic. This will buff all your damage. Not to mention healing if you're running Lightweaver's Flame with Flame Breath or Fire Breath, so that's cool. Blast Furnace just makes your Fire Breath's damage last longer, like the dot component, which again will be a healing over time component if you are running Lightweaver's Flame. Protracted Talons just makes your Azure Strike damage one additional enemy. When you have nothing to heal and there's multiple mobs, I do feel Preservation Evoker will spend a lot of his time just like spamming Azure Strike if Deep Breath and Flame Breath or Fire Breath are on cooldown. So yeah, it's just pretty self-explanatory talent. And then Leaping Flames has a pretty cool interaction for Preservation specifically because you are the healer of your group. This just adds more healing synergy to Fire Breath, which is something you're always going to be using on cooldown and keys. Basically what it does is just whenever you Fire Breath... Oh, whoopsie, that's Dream Breath. Whenever you Fire Breath, you gain this Living Flame or Leaping Flames buff. It'll basically just make your Living Flame hit multiple targets, damage or healing. So yeah, if I Living Flame myself now, they're just going to shoot everywhere. Basically, if you do a max Fire Breath, you get 3 Living Flames that will shoot at either smart healing on targets that need healing, or just damage if there's mobs available and no one needs healing. Just a great talent for a 5-man setting. Whenever you can hit 3 or 4 people in your group simultaneously, that talent is very strong in smaller group settings. So yeah, and Living Flame is a pretty decent heal. So that'll be like one of the ways you can AoE heal your group even further, which the entire class is kind of like centered around. It doesn't really have like a ton of single target spam outside of Living Flame and Echo. Like that's pretty much it. So yeah. Obviously I take Obsidian Bulwark for the reduced cooldown on Obsidian Scales. Again, having my main defensive is always welcome in Mythic Plus keys. Tip to Scales is great. Gives you access to Hover or extended flight, which makes however lasts 4 seconds longer. Also just lets you cast an empowered spell instantly every 2 minutes. Not amazing, but you know, pretty decent. Um, yeah, that's pretty much it. The class side is like, I'd say it's probably like more or less cookie cutter. If you don't feel like you're gonna be able to like maximize certain aspects of this build, like Leaping Flames or Protracted Talons, for example, like maybe you're new to healing and you're not used to like DPSing while healing at the same time, and you kind of just want to focus on healing, at least like while you're learning the game or what have you. You can go into some of these like other talents like increased stam, reduce magic damage. Recall is great for when you deep breath and you can just like instantly port back. I definitely have gotten myself into trouble with deep breath, killing myself in keys. I think most evokers will be part of like the learning curve. You can also just go into healing flame if you want a little bit of haste on your living flame cast after living flaming yourself. But again, you won't be hardcasting it that much, so I found this talent to be kind of superfluous. Yeah, or you can if you're not comfortable with the damage, you can opt in to have a little bit more CC with Wing Buffet cooldown reduction or Tail Swipe cooldown reduction. Yeah, that pretty much wraps, that pretty much wraps up my thoughts on this tree. It's pretty cool. You have a lot of versatility. If you want the root again, AoE root is like a great tool to help tanks kite in Mythic Plus. So you could maybe, I don't know. I mean, Lush Growth is pretty mandatory, but you could take points out of maybe again the damage. Basically, if you want to go for any of these utility, you're going to have to sacrifice this damage because all these talents on the right side are kind of mandatory. So it's really just what you're looking to get out of your Mythic Plus keys. You know? They may be tuned in a way where healer damage doesn't matter that much, and you can just go balls to the wall with utility. Finally, I just want to do a quick word on Stasis. I think Stasis is a fantastic cooldown. It's especially in raiding. I did some raid testing with it. It was great. You can very well, instead of opting in for the rewind cooldown reduction, you can very easily just put that point into Stasis because that just gives you access to a small burst healing cooldown more frequently and makes you not so reliant on rewind. Having more options is great for keys. Honestly, I think that will just come to personal playstyle. Stasis overall will probably be better. But for now, this is what I'm choosing to run with. I like having like just my argument for the rewind reduction is that rewind has a 40-yard range. Stasis, not so much. Like you can throw like Emerald Blossoms into your Stasis or Temporal Anomalies into your Stasis, which are great spells in raids. There's a good chance they're gonna hit like a ton of people in raiding. But I've noticed on the Mythic Plus bosses especially, like the first and last boss of Azure Vaults or the last boss of Ruby Life Pools, your group can get really spread out sometimes, and like Stasis could more or less just like fall flat on its face. Like it might just smart heal like you if no one's in range when you like pop it. So that's why I personally do not like the opt into Stasis for Mythic Plus keys. Obviously with more play, my opinion might change on this, but I feel like it's kind of in the same boat as Temporal Anomaly where it can be very situational and just like kind of useless. So at least with this rewind cooldown reduction, you are never getting any waste of this talent. Like as long as you're sending rewind on cooldown for when you need it, just having that minute reduction is just always great. It'll never let you down, where Stasis has that potential to let you down, but you can have that opportunity to get let down more frequently, so whatever you value more. Yeah, so that's pretty much it. Thanks for watching.